All right. So, Janine, can you tell us a little bit about what's been happening, kind of get us up to date? Um, for our longtime listeners, you might be familiar with what's been going on in the Greater Chaco Canyon region. For those of us who were able to catch the live stream, um, you might have heard us preface this, but we're kind of going to go into depth a little bit more about what's happening. So, what has been happening? I know these updates are coming constantly. Just last night there was a pretty significant meeting, so yeah, please take it away.
Absolutely. There's a lot of history involved in this that we don't really have the time or ability to dig into, but I do want to make sure to mention that this isn't a new issue. This is the result of decades of work of grassroots people, Alatis, and many organizations that have been on the ground for a long time, like Dene Care, the Greater Chaco Coalition. Um, and other like the Red Nation and other organizations that have been working around the protection of sacred sites. Um, and so, what has really happened in the last 2 months has been sort of this introduction of a narrative around the creation of the buffer zone, that this is a Navajo and Pueblo conflict, and that we have competing interests in the protection of the sacred site. And so I think that's what's really created a lot of the misinformation and mischaracterization around what the buffer zone actually accomplishes. And it completely erases and invisibilizes the years of hard work with between Navajo and Pueblo people to protect our shared heritage and to honor that we have deep historical connections, cultural connections, and spiritual connections to this very pivotal place. And so, there's a lot of technical things that we could go into about what the Honoring Chaco initiative actually is. But in the gist of it, it's a 20-mile or 10-mile buffer zone, 10-mile buffer zone, in which the federal lands within that buffer zone now have a moratorium to prevent new oil and gas leases. And what we have seen with the seeding of the narrative that this is a Navajo and Pueblo conflict is really the spread of misinformation that this buffer zone threatens Alati rights that are within that boundary. And this is a very significant thing to handle with care because it is important to note that there is complex history in the establishment of the park in the first place, and that Alatis have faced threats to their land rights, both from the park itself, but also from the introduction of these extractive industries into our communities. And so, what we've done is that we've been trying to mobilize to really identify the source of misinformation, to clarify that this is not a land grab, that this is actually a pause on a very, very harmful activities that are threatening both the sacred site, but also the health of the land, the the safety of the water and the health of the people in and around this area, so that we can maintain clarity and purpose in that when Navajo and Pueblo people work together, we can accomplish great things for the protection of our peoples and for our shared future. And what we have seen is that it's really been the result of misinformation spread through the administrative turnover and tribal government on the Navajo Nation. It seems that our current leaders weren't properly prepped, are given enough information to truly understand the length of consultation and of work and of government to government meetings that have occurred between Navajo and Pueblo leadership, are the decades of research and data collection and advocacy that has been led by community members and Alati members themselves, as well as grassroots organizations on Navajo Nation. And what we are seeing is that in seeding this false information, it's really creating a sense of fear among our own people, and creating like this idea that that we're somehow in conflict with one another, and that this initiative is something that has been conducted top down in a way that violates Navajo sovereignty. And what we want to do and what we want to clarify for everyone is to break through a lot of that misinformation and reiterate that this has been a grassroots movement. It has also been a movement supported by Navajo and Pueblo leadership, that this is not a land grab, that all this does is affect federal lands, and it has no impact on existing leases. As well as the fact that this is just the first step towards a larger effort to restore the rights of people who are in and around the Chaco region, but while protecting us from further destructive oil and gas development. And I'll pause there because I know there's so many different things to go into that the rest of the panelists will cover.
Yeah, thank you, Janene. Real quick, who are some of the actors behind the spread of this misinformation?
Oh. Well, what we know, some of the actors that are behind this really come from the Nye Grant administration. We saw like a really inflammatory remarks made through Fox News, that this was a land grab, that people, that they were calling for a blockade to block access to Chaco Canyon. But there also have been bad actors on the ground, and it remains to be seen whether or not this is their own misunderstanding that they're spreading, or whether this is intentional. But we did see on the ground, like Delegate Danny Simpson, who represents many of the communities around the Chaco region, also reiterating some of this false information. As well as one of the allottees that is for oil and gas. And I think that distinction needs to be very clear. The allottees are themselves representing different interests. There are many who are against oil and gas development, and there are many who are for it. And those that are for it are really concerned about the economic well-being of their families, and the ability to support themselves. And then there are some people who are taking advantage of that. And one of those individuals that we've seen on the ground really inflaming the situation is Irvin Chavez. And so I think these individuals do need to be named, because we need to understand why they are spreading misinformation to our communities, and why some of our Navajo Nation elected leadership isn't coming out and providing more clear and factual information directly to the communities in our own language, so that they can better understand what this initiative does and does not do.